All right, so here is Module 2, Step 2. And so this is a little bit different. Here we are going to be learning about how to express a function as an equation here, maybe given a table or something like that. And so we have to basically look at, says which function describes the relationship between the inputs and the outputs in the table. One way to do this is definitely just to plug in an x and then see if you get the output g of x. Okay, so if you look at, let's say, the first one, choice A, if I plug in negative 40, will I get minus 15? Or sorry, will I get, if I do minus 15, will I get negative 10? So I can do that. So again, starting here, negative 40, and then minus 15. So if I plugged in, like I said, the input into there, negative 40 minus 15, am I going to get negative 10? Well, no, I'm actually going to get negative 55, and that is definitely not negative 10. So this one then is out. Let's try another one. 4 times an input. Okay, so if I do 4 times negative 40, am I going to get negative 10? Again, you don't see that because 4 times 4 is 16. So 4 times 40 would be 160, and then you've got the negative with it as well. So no, this is not describing this relationship here. Okay? Let's try this one. If we plugged in x, negative 40, now divided by 4, do we get negative 10? Yes, we do, because 40 divided by 4 is 10. So a negative 40 divided by positive 4 is negative 10. So this actually works. And then we're going to see that if we plugged it into that one, it wouldn't work, because you can only have one description of it. So that helps right there, just to plug it in. That's really what I would do, at least for the first two, but there is another way to do this. The other way to do it is to look at, first of all, the y-intercept. You can look here. Okay, you can see that the y-intercept, when you plug in a 0 for x, you're going to get a 0 for y. So automatically, I can tell you, if you're creating an equation that looks like y equals mx plus b, where b is your y-intercept, I can already see that the y-intercept is 0. So my equation is going to be like that, or not writing the 0, it's just going to be like that. Okay, and that looks like these equations over here, B and C. That gets rid of A and D because those both have like a minus 15 or a plus 15, and we're not going to have that. We're going to have a 0 for the y-intercept. So I can already tell you that it's either B or C. And then what you have to do is, in order to find this number, the m, the slope, remember that's slope, you have to look at the change in the output and the change in the input. If you see the change in the output, even if you just look here, these are the nicer numbers to look at. It goes from 0 to 5 to 10. You can see that you're adding 5 each time. Adding 5. Okay? So the change in the output is 5. So that tells me, again, remember, it's y, like if this represents your y, slope is y, the change in y divided by the change in x. So again, the slope will be the change in the y values, which is 5, over the change in the x values. So if we look over here, the change in the x values, if you go down this way, is 20. 0 plus 20 is 20. 20 plus 20 is 40. So I would write, again, the change in y, that's my output, goes on the top. The change in my input, or my x values, goes on the bottom. 5 over 20 reduces to 1 over 4. So that tells me my equation is y equals 1/4 x. And that's exactly what this looks like, x divided by 4. That's the same thing. 1/4 of x can be written as x divided by 4. So now you know how to do it two ways. So let's do another one. So we're going to do this one. Which function describes the relationship between the inputs and outputs in the table? So, again, you can really just plug in your input and see if you get that output for each of these, or you can come up with the function and then just, using what we just did, and we can just find it. So again, let's start by plugging in the numbers. So if I plug in a -5, or we can actually, let's use something nicer maybe. Let's go with 3 and 5. Let's use this point, 3, 5. So if I plug in a 3, am I going to get a 5? Okay, if I plug in this 3 right here, am I going to get a 5 for the output? So 3 minus 2. Is that equal to 5? No. It's actually equal to 1. So this one's out. Look here, is negative times 3, because that's what the value for the input is, x, negative times 3 is actually equal to -3. It's not equal to 5, so we know that one's out. All right, and then look here. If we plug it into C, you'd say 3 divided by 2. Is that equal to 5? No. It's equal to still 3/2 or 1/2. So we know that one's out. So it's got to be this one. But we can, again, we can always check it by just plugging in the 3. So if we plug in a 3 plus 2, we do indeed get a 5. So we know that this is the answer. So D ends up being the answer for this one. And now it's not as easy to see the y-intercept on this graph, but you can at least find the slope. And you could probably plot this too and see where the y-intercept is. But again, if you're thinking y equals mx plus b, so normally you would look at the table and try to find out what b is. You can kind of see, like, 0 would be in the middle here, the value for 0, because it goes from -1 to 1. So 0 would be right in the middle. So what's right in the middle of 1 and 3? 2 is. So that's really one way I can find the y-intercept without graphing it. But so now I know it's y equals something times x plus 2. And then we just got to figure out what is the slope. Well, if we look at the change in y, or the output, look at the change. So it goes from 3 to 5 and 5 to 7. That's a change of 2. So now look at the change in the x values, or the input. It goes from 1 to 3 and 3 to 5. That's also a change of 2. So again, it's change of y over change of x. So change of y, so slope is change of y, which is this 2, over the change of x, which is also 2. So that ends up being 1. So my equation is 1x plus 2, which is the same thing as just x plus 2. So now do that same thing with this table. Okay, try to figure out start off with the y equals mx plus b. B, again, is the y-intercept, so find it on here. It's right here. And then find the change in y over the change in x to find your slope. Okay? Then on the back of this, there's another one. Okay, so it says write the function that has the following inputs and outputs. So again, start with the y-intercept. Now here is the y-intercept because this is x equals 0 with the y-intercept, so this is the y-intercept on this one. So y equals mx plus b, so I know, again, b is actually negative 20. So something times x plus b, but it would be a minus 20 because it's a negative 20. So it's something, you got to find that slope there. So find the change in y and divide it by the change in x, and that's going to be your slope. Okay? Number 5. Stephen is 4 years older than his sister Anne. Write a function to describe Stephen's age as a function of Anne's age. And they say Anne is X years old. So we're going to say, maybe we'll call Stephen Y, since they used X. We can call Stephen Y. And just it says Stephen is 4 years older than Anne. So this is actually really simple because they just gave it to you right there. Stephen, which is Y, his age, is means equals. 4 years older than Anne means 4 plus Anne's age. And if you had to write it then as a function instead of saying y, you could say f of x, meaning that's the same thing as y. But since we're talking about functions here, we want to say a function of x. So his age in terms of Anne's age is what that means. He's 4 more years than Anne. And the last one, write a function to describe how much Tim has paid for X number of games rented by using a long-term video game rental service that charges a one-time $50 startup fee and then a $4.99 per game rented. So again, you'll say, if you're talking about the cost in terms of the games, so you can say f of x, because remember, x is going to be the number of games rented. So it's a startup fee means it doesn't have the x next to it. It means it's just a one-time fee. Plus $4.99 per game. So $4.99 x, because remember, x is the number of games. And so that's all you have to do on this worksheet. So again, go back, try to do number 4, okay, because that's a good skill to know, and try to do number 3 as well. We've done all the other ones together.